In this video, we're going to be using SAP Business Objects Data Services to take data from an XSD schema and load it into SAP HANA. So the first thing we need to do is to log into Data Services. So we do that by going to Start. We can access that from All Programs, Data Services, and we choose the Data Services Designer. Log in with your credentials. So for me it's student and the password is welcome1, and then it logs you into the system. So what we're going to do is we're going to install an XSD schema. So I've got this XSD schema in my library. So this is what an XSD schema looks like. Essentially you have again two files, although you could have an XSD schema and the data in one file as well. So if I open up my XML file with Notepad, you can see that it contains two rows of data, which is two pieces of information about books. So this is the XML data, and of course we're using an XSD schema. So if I open up the XSD schema, this describes the data set I've just shown you. So again, we have an XSD and then we have an XML. So what we need to do is the following. We go to our 7th tab, and within our 7th tab we have a subfolder called XML schemas. We'll right click on the XML schema and select New, and we'll give our XML schema a name. So I'm going to call this one STS Books. We then choose where the file is. So here it is, it's the XSD that we're choosing, remember, not the XML. And then at the top level we choose the namespace and what's called the root element names, which are essentially the top level of the hierarchy within the XSD. We then click OK. So now if I double click on my XSD, this essentially describes the XML file which I'm going to import. So now I'm going to build a new project called XSD. I'll then create a new job within that project called XSD. And again, below the job, I'm going to build a data flow called XSD. Again, a job can contain many data flows which can run in parallel or series. So I'm going to double click on the XSD. So remember, this is where we do our extract, transform and load. So I'm going to go and select that XSD from my list of file formats and drag it on the canvas. And I'm going to make it an XML file source. Again, if I double click, it describes the structure. But now if I double click, I need to choose the XML file which this XSD file links to. So if I click on the drop down and select the file, I'm going to choose my STS Books XML. And again, if I go back to my XSD and click on the magnifying glass, we should be able to see the data in the XML file. Now I can drill into this XML file. At the top level, it's information on a book. We can see that the book has a title, it belongs in a department, and it has an author. So an XSD is very similar to a DTD, although the structure of the XSD of course is different. So what we've done there is we've tested that Data Services can read the XSD file alongside the XML file. So now that we've done that, we need to firstly unnest this XSD information. So we can do this with a query transform which we put on our canvas, and I'm going to rename it to unnest. And then I'll join the output of the XSD file to the input of the unnest query transform. So within that we need to unnest this schema. It's very easy to do. Essentially when we unnest a schema, we're linking each of the levels of the hierarchical schema together. Now, if you only want data from example, about the department and title, and you're not concerned with first name, last name, then you don't need to join these two levels together. You would only need to unnest the first two levels. This would obviously help with performance if the XSD is very large. So I'm going to drag the bookstore, the top level of the hierarchy, to the right, and then I'll right click, select Make Current, and again right click to unnest the data, i.e. to provide the joins. I'm going to say unnest with subschemas. So this essentially creates a join between all the levels of the hierarchy within the XSD. The next level is to have a normal query transform, which I'm going to leave called query, and this one is going to be used to select the data from those data sets. So you can see we've got department, title, first name, last name, price. However, we don't have a primary key, and when we're loading data to HANA, we need a primary key. So the way we can do this is we can right click on our target query, select new output column, and I'm going to call this load ID, and we're going to make it an integer and the primary key, and click on OK. Now we have a function within data services called the genRowNum function, which provides a unique identifier per row. There are many ways to access this function. One way is to click on the functions list here, and then you're presented with all the inbuilt data services functions. If I go down to my miscellaneous functions, one of the functions there is called genRowNum, and as you can see by the description, this returns the generated row number for the current instance. So essentially it will return a unique identifier for each row of the data set. So I'll click on next. This means that the function takes no parameters, so then I'll click on finish. Now when you see the double blue lines next to the actual column, this means that this column has been transformed in some way. And we know it's been transformed because we're using the genRowNum function. The last step is quite easy. We just need to select the columns that we want, and again we can choose the order in which we want the columns outputted in HANA. So in this example, I'm going to select the title and the first name and last name first. I'm then going to select the department, and lastly I'm going to select the price. But I'm also going to create a new column at the very end called full name. I'll insert this column below the price, and this will be a varchar, and I'm going to make this a varchar 50. Now, even though I place a column in a certain place, I can move that column by right-clicking, selecting cut, and then right-clicking where I want that item to go. So I'm going to put it above department, pasting, and then choose whether I want it above or below that column. So you can see it's very easy to move columns. Now, this full name is essentially going to be a concatenation of first name and last name. So it's a good demonstration of how we can use SAP Business Objects Data Services functionality to modify or transform data. To do this is very straightforward. I'm going to say I want it to be the first name, and then concatenate is using a double pipe, and I'm going to say I want a space, and then I want to pipe the space with or join the space to the last name. So again, I'll drag the last name to the right hand side. So this is a simple example of a transformation in data services. Of course, if I make a mistake and put 3 pipes, as in, so it's not a concatenation, and click somewhere on the screen, it will show us where the error is. And the beauty of data services is that I can validate this screen, and it will show me exactly where the error is by right-clicking and selecting Go to Error. So of course, let's create that. Let's revalidate, and it looks everything is good. We're getting a warning, but a warning is fine. It's just telling us we're going to do a data conversion. So the last step is to go back to the data flow level and add the target table which we're going to create in HANA. So again, we can do this by right-clicking, by selecting our template table, dropping it on the canvas, and I'm going to call this one STS, I'm going to call this DIM Books. And I'm going to load it in my STS schema. I'll actually rename that to XSD. So it's going in the HANA schema, and it's going into a schema HANA data store, and it'll go into a database called STS, and the table name will be XSD. So then I'll click on OK. So you can see here we've done a lot of transformational work very quickly and very easily. And the last step is to simply say, well, I want anything from the query in a specific order, which we've chosen here, to be outputted into my HANA table. Very, very straightforward. Of course, the last step is to execute the job. So I can do that by right-clicking on the job, selecting Execute. It'll prompt me to save all changes and execute, so that's fine. I'll click on Yes. And the last step is to click on OK, that we want to execute the job. The most important thing we're looking for is that the job completed successfully. We've seen that there's no errors. That's a good thing. And on the Monitor tab, we can see that we've actually copied 2 rows across to the target. The last couple of ways we can check is to go back to the data flow, and now we can see a magnifying glass underneath the table that we created in HANA. If I click on the magnifying glass, it will show me the data. So again, because we created a primary key, we've got a numeric ID, and again, of course, you need that for a column store table in HANA. And also we concatenated the first name with the last name in this column called full name, and we reordered the columns. Of course, a simple way to check that the data is there is to log into the HANA Studio, expand your schema, and just investigate that the table actually does exist. So I'll expand my schema. I'll go into my catalog and expand the schema STS. And within the tables, I now have a table called XSD. And if I right click and go to data preview, we can see that we've got that data which was in XSD XML format. We've taken the XSD, we've applied the XML to the XSD, and we've exported the data and loaded it into SAP HANA. So again, you can see that's a very easy way in which SAP Business Objects Data Services can connect to XML data, whether it's XSD, XML, DTD, XSLT. We can connect to the data, we can transform it, and we can load it into SAP HANA.